She tried to hijack my graduation in front of everyone. I had already made sure she had nothing to hijack. My mother's girlfriend Renata, not the warm aunt from a previous chapter of my life but an entirely different woman who shares only the name, entered our household when I was 16 and immediately began a project I can only describe as competitive displacement. She had two daughters of her own, both younger than me, both being carefully positioned in my mother's affections like pieces on a board. I watched this happen with the clarity of a teenager who has already learned that naming a dynamic out loud tends to make adults uncomfortable rather than reflective. By the time I reached my final year of university, I had spent 6 years managing the particular exhaustion of being subtly sidelined in my own family. Renata's methods were refined, never overtly cruel, always deniable, delivered with a warmth that made me feel unreasonable for noticing. My mother, who loved her and needed the stability of the relationship, had developed a practiced blindness to the friction that I had stopped expecting her to outgrow. My graduation was a significant ceremony. My degree was in biomedical engineering, 4 grueling years, a distinction I had earned without financial support from home after Renata had quietly redirected that conversation toward her younger daughter's gap year costs in a way my mother had not recognized as redirection. I had worked 2 jobs for 3 of those 4 years. The graduation was mine in a way that very few things had been cleanly mine. I invited my mother. I did not invite Renata. I was entitled to a limited number of guest tickets, and I allocated them to my mother, my grandfather, and my closest friend Sim. This was not a statement. It was arithmetic. Renata interpreted it as a statement. What I learned through my grandfather, who has sharp ears and the patience of someone who has watched family politics across 8 decades, was that Renata had arranged to attend anyway. Not with a ticket, those were controlled, but by positioning herself in the public viewing area outside the venue hall where family members without formal seating sometimes gathered near screens showing the ceremony feed. She had, according to my grandfather, told my mother she simply wanted to support the day from a distance. She had also, he noted, brought her 2 daughters and a professional camera. I had anticipated something. I had not anticipated that specific configuration, but I had anticipated something because 6 years of paying attention to Renata had taught me that significant occasions were her preferred terrain, so I had made arrangements of my own. The university's graduation office had a formal policy regarding unauthorized photography and conduct in the public viewing areas during ceremonies. I had read this policy carefully and spoken with the events coordinator 3 weeks prior, explaining in general terms that I had a family situation that might require gentle management and asking what the procedure was if someone in the public area became disruptive or began conducting what amounted to a competing photographic session that interfered with other families' experience. The coordinator had been helpful, professional, and very clear about the procedure. Renata lasted 40 minutes in the public viewing area before an event staff member approached her party, cited the photography policy, and asked her to put the professional camera away. When she objected with sufficient volume to constitute the disruption the policy also covered, she was asked to move to a quieter position further from the screens. Her daughters, according to my grandfather, looked mortified in the specific way of teenagers who have been brought to an event that has gone wrong and cannot leave because they have no transport of their own. I walked across the stage and received my certificate and shook the dean's hand and looked out at the hall where my mother was sitting in the 3rd row with my grandfather and Sim, all 3 of them watching with expressions that required no interpretation. My mother cried, the uncomplicated kind. Afterward, at the lunch I had booked at a restaurant that held exactly 4 seats, she mentioned that Renata had texted her from outside to say the viewing area had been chaotic and disorganized. My mother said she was sorry, Renata had had a difficult morning. I said I was sure it had been frustrating. Then I ordered something good and sat in a room containing only people who had earned their seats at my table and ate a meal that nobody was managing or redirecting or quietly positioning against anything. My grandfather ordered dessert first. I told him that was the best idea I had heard all day. He said he had been saving it for a special occasion. This qualified.